My name is Sherry Walling. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I hang out with founders and people who own SaaS businesses. That's a lot of how I spend my time. We have this gift for you. This book that came out last February is a collaboration between myself and my husband, Rob Walling. And we're hoping that it provides some value to you. And it is a gift from us and from the crew at Bean Ninjas. And if you haven't heard of Bean Ninjas, it's a group of Australian surfers that are accountants. So they are like the coolest accountants ever. And they do your taxes and your budget and all of your accounting things, and they're cool. And they value work-life balance, thus the surfing, and wanted to support LTV Conf and support me by providing a copy of the book for all of you. Please don't sell it used on Amazon. If you don't want it, just find a founder friend and give it to them. It's fine. Yeah, trying to keep those prices up, right? So as I said, I'm a clinical psychologist. I have a PhD, and I spend most of my time helping people work through hard things. So I am a traditionally trained psychologist in that I've spent a lot of time doing research, working in medical schools, and treating mental illness, however we broadly define that, but basically helping people with the hardest experiences of their lives. In the last couple of years, I've focused more and more on the mental health experience of entrepreneurs and founders, because I've had a lot of people in my living room for the last 20 years who are having a hard time, whether that's being on the brink of divorce or feeling like they're ready to throw in the towel and run away from their company, or they're burnt out, or they're fried, or they're sad, or they're lonely. I'm sure I'm not talking about any of you. But this is my husband, Rob. He's the co-founder of Drip. And so we've been married for 18 years. Yes, I was a child bride. But this is who I love. And folks like you who've, again, been in my living room for the last 20 years talking about the ups and downs of your life as an entrepreneur and as a founder. So I'm here today because, I was invited, but I was really curious about this topic, LTV Conf, lifetime value. And I talked a little bit with Andy and John about how they came up with this name, but it really struck me because it feels really core to the message of what I think all of us should be talking about, is how we understand these frameworks in our own lives, how we think about what is giving us life, what is most meaningful in our lives, how we think about using our time well, both on a daily basis and on like an existential level, making sure that the time that we have in our lives is what we want it to be. And then thinking about value. What do we value? What value do we bring to the world? What values do we want to seek after? So that's a little bit of the framework that I want to use to talk today. And we're going to talk about burnout. We're going to talk about some meatier psychological concepts. But really, I want us to think together about these kind of blanket terms, I guess. So because it's a little bit late in the day, let's do a little audience participation. I just want you to turn to someone next to you and answer this question with them. And it's a big question. You don't have to think about it a lot. No one's going to hold you to your answer. You don't have to tattoo it on your body in any place. But think about what energizes you. What is life-giving to you? What sort of makes you light up? That might be your kids, your dog, your, like lots of sales coming in after a launch. It could be lots of things. So just turn to whoever's next to you. Take 2 seconds. What is it for you? Don't overthink it.
Spending time with people. People.
Okay, come back. What are some of the things you said? Just shout it out. What's life-giving to you?
New experiences.
New experiences. Awesome. Mark, I made eye contact with you. It was awkward.
Conferences, being on my bike.
Being on your bike, running conferences. How about somebody over here?
And family.
Oh, sorry, I missed that. Sorry, Joe. What brings you life? What lights you up?
Finding flow.
Finding flow. Excellent. Okay. Here's another question for your little conversation group. What wastes your time? What sucks time away from you?
Guidelines.
So just say that real quick next to family, running conferences. Okay, come back. How many of you said email? Okay. What else was on your list?
Repeating tasks.
Sorry?
Repeating tasks.
Repeating tasks. Grocery store.
Internet.
The internet, social media. Yeah, did you have one? Eating? Okay. Anybody over here? Yeah. Slack. Ooh, we're going to talk about Slack today. And lastly, what do you most value? This might be similar to your first question, but it might be different. What are the values that guide you, that drive you? What do you want on your gravestone? John valued this. The mark that John left on the world was this. What do you want in that blank space? Big question. It's okay. I'm not going to hold you to it.
Helping people grow.
Helping people grow. Okay. What else? What do you want to add to the world? Living without regrets. Taking opportunities, making the most of your time. What else? Do you know? And maybe that's the most important question. Is it top of mind? Have you thought about it? Is it sort of in the forefront of your identity, of your sense of yourself and what it is that you're doing? Because that's probably the most important part of this exercise, is how much you've thought about it, how easily it flows from you, as opposed to I don't know, I spend most of my time staring at my to-do list in my inbox and I just haven't thought about these big questions. I had a conversation with a founder last week. Part of my job is to do some one-on-one consulting and help when things are not going well. So co-founder disagreements, burnout, depression, feeling indecisive, those are the kinds of things that I talk with people about. Last week I spoke with this person, and I'll change the details so you can't identify him, but he's super successful, runs a SaaS business, has about 20 employees, really great income, lots of money, lots of toys, cool house, nice wife, all the things. And when I speak to him, it's interesting. We speak on Zoom, and he's flat. There's not much expression on his face. And so to me, as a psychologist, that's something I'm watching for. How much expression or energy or emotion is contained in the way that you look, the way that you hold yourself, your facial expression. And he's just sort of zoned out, checked out. And we're talking about, I kind of open the conversation, how you doing? What's going on? And, oh, we got some new customers this week. Oh, our sales are going really well. It's really flat. I was like, when's the last time you laughed? I don't know. I mean, when something was funny. He has these sort of glib, non-answer answers. And he's really, really burdened by negative customer interactions. He's burdened by somebody who's a key team member who just quit. He's frustrated with his wife. He's really unhappy with his marriage, and things are not super efficient or not going very well with his parenting life. And on the outside, this is somebody who sort of has everything that all of us are working for, right? Stable income, all of the bells and whistles, all of the pieces. But from the inside out, he doesn't care. It doesn't matter to him. It holds no value. And he has the sense that even though he's super successful, he's just sort of spinning his wheels and showing up day after day after day, and there's not a lot of spark. There's not a lot of meaning behind it anymore. And I think the reason that I tell this story is because it's not exceptional. Any of us, really, at any time, if we're not careful, can easily drift into existential dilemma, or drift into loneliness, or drift into feeling flat or ineffectual. There's nothing wrong or specifically unique about his experience, because I talk with folks like you all the time, and all of us have these parts of us that live inside of us. And I think that the mental health struggles of founders are somewhat exceptional, in the sense that you are making something that is your livelihood. Your work, your world is dependent on your ability to be creative, to communicate effectively, to solve problems, to be someone who can find the energy and the motivation to keep going in the face of failure or discouragement. Essentially, everything that you do for the success of your business depends on something that happens inside of you. Your brain, your creativity, your ability to be empathetic or present to the world. And I think that that burden is kind of heavy. You carry the responsibility of all of the pieces of your life in this business that you're growing. Many of you, some of you probably have employees, you have team members, you carry some of that sense of responsibility for their well-being. If you have a significant other or children, all of that rests on you. No pressure. You're all gonna be fine. Thomas said this in his talk yesterday. You, the founder, are the most likely point of failure. The way that you make decisions, of course, impacts all manner of things in your business. How you manage your emotions when you are making decisions about selling a company or hiring someone or tolerating a sales funnel that's not working well. How do you tweak that? How do you make that choice when really on the inside you're sort of screaming and frustrated and disappointed? How do you handle that part of yourself? Will all, of course, determine your success in the end. That on top of the fact that it's kind of just hard to be human. So from a mental health perspective, we look at very high rates of what we call mental illness. About 1 in 5 adults in the US, and the stats are not very different in the EU or in the UK specifically, experience mental illness in a given year. And I'm not going to get into the weeds of what we define as mental illness or not. We can have that debate over dinner later. But the bottom line is that when we talk about mental illness, we're talking about folks who are suffering in some way or another, whether it's depression or anxiety. There are folks that are in significant pain that is disrupting their ability to bring their best self to their work and to their world. So it's not something to be taken lightly. And when it's not treated, when it's ignored, it costs a lot. So from a business perspective, at least in the US, the #1 cause of disability in the United States of America is depression. So when we talk about lost dollars, lost potential for bright, amazing contributors to do something great for our economy or for our businesses, it's mental illness that's often the contender. It's the thing that's getting in the way of talent being sort of brought forth and utilized well. And not only do we see this loss of potential contribution, but people who are struggling with mental illness on average die significantly younger than people who don't. And all of us, I'm sure, have been touched by this, whether it's our own struggles that we may go through from time to time, or it's people that we love, or it's people on our team, or it's bands that we admire who lose a great artist to suicide, as we seem to do regularly often these days. I feel like we don't do ourselves and our teams, we don't do right by ourselves and our teams if we don't think about this, if we don't pay attention to the role that these burdens are taking on us and our businesses and the people around us that we care about. And then let's layer onto that the psychological burdens or impact of being an entrepreneur, of stepping off of the well-trodden path of, here, work at this job for 20 years, sit in your cube, receive your paycheck, retire fat and happy, get your gold watch, and move on. I mean, that's a really nice, safe, secure path, and you guys have opted out of that for, I'm sure, a variety of good reasons. Some of us just can't do it. But of course, with that comes that burden of responsibility that I talked about a minute ago. I think one of the things that I end up talking with folks about a lot is loneliness, is that sense of when you are making something, even if you have a great co-founder, a lot of it lives in your head. A lot of it is on your shoulders. So there's an inherent loneliness. Even if you have a great significant other or spouse, there's a limit to how much they want to hear about, the personalization strategy that you're using in your email funnel or whatever. At least in my marriage, we've come up with that's enough. I don't want to talk about that anymore. Increasingly, there is, I think, this open conversation about some of the mental health struggles that entrepreneurs experience. And burnout is one of these words that you may have heard that gives some kind of life to the mental health burden that many founders experience. And when we talk about burnout from a technical perspective, it has three components: physical and emotional exhaustion, the sense in which you are starting your day tired, you just don't have oomph, you don't have energy, or maybe you have this kind of lingering cough that never gets better because your immune system can't quite kick it, can't quite function. Sort of multi-system exhaustion. The other piece of this is an experience of cynicism and detachment. This is where you find that you're pretty pissed off at your customers on a regular basis, or people that really you should enjoy or at least handle politely seem to get under your skin. Your teammate, your significant other. You feel detached from why you're doing what you're doing, and you feel kind of cynical and just there's an edginess to how it feels inside of you. Some of that joy is gone to your work. And then the last component of this is a sense of ineffectiveness and lack of accomplishment. And this can be despite any external metric that suggests that you're doing a good job. So like the consulting client I talked about at the beginning, by every metric that we would normally use to evaluate success, super successful. However, he didn't feel successful. He felt like he's pushing a boulder up a hill all the time, and he can't get traction, and he doesn't give himself credit for the successes that he experiences. So more than feeling crummy, burnout has some very significant consequences for our neurological health. So because of sort of modern neuroscience, we can use functional MRIs to look inside someone's brain, and we can compare the brains of people who are experiencing high levels of burnout to folks who are not, sort of matched control studies. And we see some pretty significant differences in people's brains. So one of the notable differences is people who are experiencing high levels of burnout, who sort of answer in the top 20% of a burnout questionnaire, have an enlarged or overactive amygdala. And the amygdala is the part of the brain that is most active in processing negative emotion and fear and anxiety. So it's kind of the center of our difficult to tolerate emotional experience. So the amygdala is really, really active, which means that our system is essentially kind of flooded with these negative emotions. But what becomes more troubling is that the connections between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex start to wear out. They become less healthy. The prefrontal cortex is a part of our brains that's good at talking us down. It's the part of us that we use to calm down, that we talk ourselves through, like, hey, this probably isn't as catastrophic as I think it might be. Like, there's probably some ways that we can problem solve this. It's the part of your brain that you really count on to be able to regulate that more animalistic, like, ah! When those connections between those parts of us begin to wear out, we enter this cycle where the negative emotion flows freely and our internal capacity to calm down wears out. And literally we see the neurons die, the connective materials begin to atrophy, and those connections aren't strong. So I guess I'm not trying to I am trying to scare you a little bit. We also see significant consequences for heart disease among folks who score highly on burnout scales. And the reason that I'm telling you these scary stats is because I don't want you to ignore this if this is something that you're feeling. If you are feeling burnt out or someone on your team is feeling burnt out, it's not a buck up buttercup situation. It's not work harder, stay up later, hustle more. Those things are not the right answer because frankly you're doing irreparable damage in some cases to your brain and to your body. And so that very skill that all of your work depends on, that healthy, creative, functioning brain that you need in order to be successful, is starting to wear out and is becoming less adaptive, less creative, less able to problem solve, less able to communicate, less able to do all the things that you need it to be able to do. So if you are feeling some of these things, you're not unusual. It's pretty normal. They've done some studies both in the US and the UK, which put the rate of burnout among employed adults at a 25 to 30%, which is huge. But that doesn't mean it's normal just because it's common. So now that I've properly depressed all of you, let's talk about what to do about it. So first thing, let's do a little intermission, a little more audience participation. One of the best skills that we have to shortchange, or to shortcut, I should say, or hack the system, for you coders out there, one of the best things that we can do to calm ourselves down in a moment when we're feeling a spike of anxiety is to take these long, slow, deep breaths. This is not how, when your mom or your kindergarten teacher is just go take a breath. When we do this systematically, there's actually a tremendous amount of science that suggests that we are resetting that amygdala process. We're calming down our brain quickly when we can take low, deep breaths. So let me show you how to do this, because it's not always intuitive. So if you'll bear with me, sit back in your chair, lean into the chair behind you, put your feet flat on the floor. Just kind of take a moment to center yourself. One option, if you'd like to try it, is to put one hand over your belly, kind of where the palm of your hand is right on your belly button. And maybe even look down at that hand. And when you inhale, see if you can round your belly such that your hand moves. Kind of like there's a balloon in your stomach. As you inhale, you okay? As you inhale, you're filling the balloon. So give it a couple tries. And as you exhale, your hand moves in towards your spine. Suddenly you get a little skinnier and a little taller. So inhale, belly rounds. Exhale, hand comes in towards your spine. So try this with your eyes closed if you want. You don't have to. It's a choice. We'll just take a couple breaths together. Let your shoulders kind of fall away from your ears. Let your body relax into the chair. And as you breathe in through your nose, think about bringing that oxygen all the way through your nose, all the way through your windpipe, down through the center of your body and into your belly. And as you exhale, think about pulling your belly in and letting that carbon dioxide flow back out and be released into the room. Take a couple more low, slow, deep breaths. Breathing in oxygen that nourishes you, and releasing or breathing out the carbon dioxide that you no longer need. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and return to this space. So that's a really simple little moment that you can have at any point in your day, whether you're in the middle of a tricky conversation or you're trying to make a big decision. You don't even have to close your eyes or put your hand on your belly. You can do it sneakily without anyone knowing that you're just taking some deep breaths. We have this nerve that runs really from the base of our brainstem all the way through our spinal cord and then has these parts of it that interact with all of our major organs. It's called the vagus nerve. And it's the nerve or the part of our bodies that's most important in enacting the parasympathetic nervous system or the calm down system. And when we breathe slowly and deeply, we're tricking the nerve into thinking everything's okay. There's no threat, I'm not anxious. Because if you think about it, it's almost impossible to be super stressed out or super upset and still have this like really calm, slow breath. They're antithetical, right? When we get upset, our bodies are designed to speed up respiration, to move all of the blood into our arms and legs so we can fight or run or do something drastic. But when we breathe slowly and deeply, we're telling our bodies like, all is well. We don't have to have a big reaction. Chill out, amygdala. It's okay. So this is a pretty legit scientific mental health hack that I recommend that if you don't use this or have some kind of yoga practice or meditation practice, that you just find a little way to integrate a couple of low, slow, deep breaths into your life in a given day, because there's pretty significant benefit. Okay, so what else? What other skills do you need to combat or try to prevent the potential for all of these, for burnout and depression, all these other negative outcomes that I so scarily talked about or described to you? So let's think about these in terms of this lifetime value. So we want to think about things that optimize the quality of our life, help us master our time, and are in line with our personal values. So this is going to be different for each of us because each of us are built a little bit differently. So you can't just take my slides and integrate them wholeheartedly into your own life. You have to do some work to think about it for yourself. But I have 7 strategies for you to think through. And these aren't just like strategies like the gospel according to Sherry. I've basically taken the research on burnout. There are consistently about 6 factors that predict the likelihood that someone's going to be burnt out. So I took those 6 and I kind of reverse engineered them. And we'll give you some strategies for like how to do it better so that you don't fall into those 6 risk factors that tend to predict burnout. How many of you have employees or a team of people that work for you? Okay. All right. So I'll try to help you think about this both for yourself and for your team, but we can have more dialogue in the Q&A about that if you need more ideas about how to do these things for other people. So number 1, meaningful connections. We are a very relational species. We are designed to be in relationship with other people. And when we are experiencing high levels of loneliness is when we are most psychologically at risk. In fact, the number 1 protective factor, if you're going to go through something extremely difficult, a traumatic experience, a natural disaster, an assault, the loss of a child, really hard, painful things, the number 1 predictor of how well you will do after that crisis is the quality of your relationships. It doesn't mean a huge network. It doesn't mean you have to know everyone. It means you have to have a couple of people that care deeply about you and you care deeply about them. And that is probably, besides just breathing, one of the best investments that you can make in your mental health for the long run over the course of your life. So making sure that you are putting in the time to have friendships. That can be people who are fellow entrepreneurs, people who are in your business, who are caring about and involved in the same things that you are. I mean, coming to a conference like this that's small in size, where you get time to really interact with other people who have the same interests and same concerns and sometimes the same burdens as you. But it also means making sure that you're spending time with some folks who just like you for you, or like you for the way that you play football or soccer, depending on where you live, that just hang out with you. Those kinds of relationships, maybe they're easy to skip when you're busy and you're hustling and you're launching something, but they are also a great investment in your business, because without those meaningful connections, you're going to have nobody to high five when you're successful or nobody to drink with when you're sad. So you want to make sure that you're making those investments in also your significant other, your relationships. One of the biggest threats to our mental health is loneliness. And many, many people around the world are increasingly lonely. We've kind of traded real relationships for social media relationships. And social media is great and fine. I'm not going to vilify it. It's important. But it's not the same quality of relationship as we have when we're sitting with someone over coffee or sharing a meal together. So being aware of loneliness within yourself and loneliness in those around you is an important way to protect yourself from the burdens of being an entrepreneur or the possibility of depression or burnout. Second tip, if you don't know how to do this, learn how to focus well. We all are overwhelmed with the number of stimulation that we can experience in a day. Like, how many of you have more than one email account? Yep. How many of you have a Twitter, a Facebook, a LinkedIn, or some combination of those? How many of you use Slack? Okay. So and there are, I know, other tools that could fit in that category, but that's just like the social media / communication category of things that are competing for your attention. And one of the things that I am seeing and that the research is beginning to show is that we have made a pretty significant error in our assumptions about what I would call cognitive flexibility. You guys, multitasking isn't really a thing. We like to think it is, but it's not really a thing, especially for highly complicated neurological tasks. So most of us can walk and talk or eat and talk, but to be on Slack and corresponding with our team while we're on a Zoom call with a potential customer, that's probably not actually happening the way that you think it's happening. So if you're curious about this topic, there's increasingly all this research that's looking at what's happening to the brain when we're dividing our attention. So when you're doing something and you decide, I'm just going to check to see if that email came in, just checking, just check. We think we're just hopping over into another task for, I don't know, maybe 20 seconds just to see if that email came in. But what's actually happening is our brain is shifting sets. And when we make that shift, it leaves a trace. It's called an attentional trace. It's sort of like the jet stream that follows an airplane, where you can sort of like see how it's lingering behind it. When we're doing work on complicated tasks, or when we're learning something new, optimally, we want all those neurons on that trajectory fired up and working all at one time. We want all of the energy in our brains to be maximizing connection and speed and myelinating thickly. So myelination, or myelin sheath, is sort of the covering around neurons where they connect, like the rubber or the coating around an electrical wire. It sort of protects the connection. And if myelination doesn't happen efficiently, then the connection isn't efficient. So the more that we set shift, say that we're sort of lighting up one part of our brain in our Zoom conversation, we're using a certain set of neurons, and then we hop over to Slack, we're lighting up another set of neurons. The first set of neurons is not going to be functioning efficiently, and the second set of neurons is going to keep activated longer than we're actually working on that task. So I can totally geek out about this, and maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. But all that to say is, when we are switching between things, even for a couple seconds, we're actually putting this cognitive burden on the neurons in our brains in ways that cause us to be more stressed out, less focused, and less able to do deep work, to do creative work, to do focused work. So if you're curious about this topic, the book Deep Work by Cal Newport is a fantastic kind of summary of this research, as well as some strategies to help you focus. Because increasingly what we're seeing is kind of a crisis of fractured attention, where it's harder for us to learn new information, and it's harder for us to stay focused or hold in our memories things that we have learned, because we're not allowing enough time to let that myelin really sort of encode or cover those connections, because we're shifting too fast. So if you work on a team and you guys use Slack, consider some different ways of doing that. And sometimes I've seen people use Slack sort of like office hours. Like between 10 and 12, everyone's on Slack, so we can like make sure that we're available to each other to work together and collaborate and ask questions of each other. But from 1 to 3, that's like deep work time. You don't have to be on Slack during that time. There's an assumption that you're doing your work and you don't have to respond. Also, it's okay to reset your relationship with email. Most of us don't work in life or death circumstances where if you don't get to it for 4 hours, some really bad thing is going to happen. It's okay to turn off the notifications and say, I'm not available right now. I'm doing something else, and I'm giving my full attention to this other thing that I'm doing. And you might be surprised at the level of productivity and the level of kind of creativity that you experience when you let yourself work in some of these more focused ways. All right, next thing, manage the workload. I know this is hard. I know this is hard as a founder. But a couple quick things that you might need to integrate into your vocabulary are words like, no, I can't do that. Too many things. I can't commit to something else. Or later. Sometimes I send emails and say, hey, I got your email. Thank you for it. I'm going to think about it. I'm going to get back to you in a couple weeks. Some people still like me. I still have some friends. Even though I say, I want to give this my full attention, I just can't do it right now. I'm going to get back to you later. That's okay. It's okay. And also help. Asking for help, delegating well, getting to the point in your business where you are really mindful of what kinds of things other people can do for you, and letting yourself be okay with not being the center of your business universe, and knowing that your limits are there for a reason. And I don't like this either, right? I'm one of those people who has her fingers in lots of different things. I work a lot, I work hard, I love my work. It gives me a lot of life and energy. But getting to the point where you're willing to say, hey, enough is enough. It's time for a vacation. It's time for a Friday. It's time for focused time with the people that I love. And I don't want to say yes to anything else because the cost is too high. Number 4, strategy to prevent burnout in yourself and your team. Focus on what you can control, and obviously let go of the things that you can't. I know that's easier said than done, but I think it's one of those good mantras that's important to keep telling yourself. What in this situation can I control? I have a customer who's flaming me on Twitter. They're super unhappy with my customer service, or we were too slow in getting back to them. What can I control about this? I can control my response, but I can't really control what they're going to do. So what can you own? Act on that, and let the rest go. Similarly, we often forget about the control that we have over taking care of our most valuable resource, ourself. So things like controlling or taking good care of our bodies. So I don't know if y'all can read this, but why do I feel terrible? Body, coffee is not a meal. Body, eat a vegetable. Body, sleep. Guess we'll never know. Body, oh my God. So taking careful control over the care that you provide to yourself. It's a great investment in your business. I won't totally geek out for you about the importance of sleep, but basically if you don't sleep enough, your brain starts to eat itself. So consider that. Something you can control, protecting your sleep, protecting your time. All right, number 5, have clear goals. And this is just good business practice for lots of reasons. But making sure that you have clear accomplishable goals, both on the macro level, so like a year goal, and on the daily level. These are the 3 things I need to get done today. And the psychological reason for this is that when you accomplish something, when you cross something off of your list, your brain has a little party. And it's like, woohoo! It gets flooded with positive emotion. And it feels really good. I mean, we know what this feels like, right? When you've like nailed it, done it, got it, all done, that feels really good. And it's an important neurological experience for your brain to have on a regular basis. When we have an endless to-do list, when it feels like our pile of work is unending, it's this drain on us. It makes us fatigued. It makes us anxious. It makes us irritable. It makes us unpleasant to have dinner with. So making sure that you have a mechanism by which you have clear goals for yourself and you're crossing them off regularly and letting your brain be settled with, okay, done and done. And the next step that follows that is making sure that you're celebrating the successes that you experience. Meaningful celebration is really, really important to kind of making this a marathon for your life. And my friend Phil, he set some goals. He was, had these specific goals. One's a revenue goal. One's a sale of one component of his business. And we went wine tasting, and he got some great wine. And then he stuck his goals on the bottle of wine. And when the goal is accomplished, guess what? You open the wine with your friends and you celebrate. It's a small thing. But it's the small things over time that begin to set the trend for how you feel about the quality of your life and how you feel about your business. So when you give yourself permission to say, hey, there's lots of things that still need to be done, in lots of ways our business can be better, but look at what we've accomplished. Look at what we finished. Look at this marker that we made. Give yourself a break. Give yourself a moment to say, I'm enjoying this. We're winning today in this specific way. Last one, this is the mucky muck existential, a little bit harder to answer perhaps. Make sure you know why you're doing what you're doing. Make sure you know that what you value is at the forefront of your work life. So my husband, Rob, loves to he loves to make things. He's a builder, right? Was like a Lego fiend when he was a kid and then was like learning to code in high school and college and loves to make things, loves to see the outcome of his effort. So the man had create tattooed on his arm because it reminds him that that's what he's about in the world. He's about making cool shit, whether that's building something with Legos, or whether that's building a family, or whether that's building a business. That is the deep-seated value that drives what he does. And so when you spend the time, and maybe it's just 5 words, 5 things. Hey, this is what I do. This is what I'm about. Keep that at the forefront of your work life. Maybe that's a sticky note or a plaque or something in your workspace, or it's the desktop of your computer. For our family, we have a painting that's in our kitchen that's been in our house, since Rob and I got married. But it's a painting that I did a number of years ago, and it has some words embedded in it that are the values that guide our family: generosity, creativity, stewardship, things that are meaningful to us. But every time we sit down to a meal, it's right there, and it just reminds us. It reminds me when I'm tempted to be unkind to one of my children or when I'm irritated. It reminds me that the thing that I said I was about in my life was about being kind or about being generous. And so it's a reminder to hold myself to that. So these are some of the things that come up often for me in my conversations with founders. You have to find your own list, but many of us enter this world or enter this work world because we want freedom, we want autonomy, we want to be able to do work that matters to us when we want to do it on our terms. Maybe we like relationships. We want to build a team that we want to work with. We want to hire the people that we want to spend time with. We want to be creative or solve problems in new ways. So ingenuity is a value. Adventure is a value for many of us because clearly we had trouble staying on the well-trodden path, so we're making a new one. Prosperity, maybe you want to make sure that you have a life that's blissful, where you have a lot of money to do what you want for yourself and for your family. Maybe that's a value for you. Generosity. It doesn't matter what you put on this list so much as you know what goes on the list. Because I think the bottom line is what you guys are deciding to do is hard. And we can do hard things if they're important to us. But when they stop being important, or we stop seeing the connection between all of that effort and the importance of it, is when we get into trouble. So make sure you know why what you're doing in a given day is important, for some greater purpose, for something that brings meaning to your life in the value that you're adding to the world. So I'm not sure that I said anything particularly new or profound to you today. There's probably a lot of like, yeah, I've heard that before. Yes, I know I need to not be on Slack all the time or not multitask too much. But I think the encouragement is that you've heard a lot of great information in the course of the last 2 days. I'm sure you have lists of strategies and follow-up things you're going to talk to your team about or think more about when you go back to wherever it is you came from. But none of that will matter at all if you don't think about these things. If you don't think about the quality of your life, the way you want to use your time, and the value that you have, the values that you have and the value that you want to bring to the world. So forgive the sort of mushy-mush psychological stuff, but don't underestimate it. Don't let it not be important. Spend the time to do the work to cultivate the inner strength, the toughness, the things that will see you through the hard times, the things that will help you to be the best kick-ass entrepreneur that you can be, and that will help you to grow a business that's super successful so you can do whatever it is you want to do in your life. Because we're also talking about sustainability. I want you to be here next year and the year after that and the year after that because you're killing it, or you've sold 3 businesses and you're on number 4 or number 5. Make this sustainable over the course of your lifetime. And in order to do that, it's not about hustle. It's about sustainability and doing it well and doing it wisely. All right, these are my people. Just feel like I have to put that up there. And that's all for me. Thanks, you guys.
Yeah, thanks, Sherry. So I'll go to the audience for questions in a minute. I got one from Twitter. Any advice for... They've used the word insomniac. I'm sure you might say that has an actual medical definition. But any advice for insomniacs beyond the usual advice?
Well, let me go through the usual things quickly, just in case they're not known widely to everybody. Yeah, so when we talk about sleep hygiene or how to optimize well for sleep, we're talking about like a dark, cold room. We're talking about not looking at any screens for the 30 minutes before you go to bed. We're talking about not working or doing anything in your bed. Your bed is for sleep and for sex, ideally. No other activities. So carving out, we call them context cues, ways that your brain is sort of primed to respond in certain spaces by letting your bedroom really be sleep time. So I don't know if that's the typical thing, but that's at least a starting point. Some of the things that we start talking about when we're talking about sleep problems, we look at caffeine usage, obviously. Probably no caffeine afternoon if you're having trouble sleeping at night. Exercise, not exercising right before bed, but exercising pretty strenuously at some time earlier in the day, ideally not within 2 hours of going to sleep. Those are the things that can help optimize like that your body's tired. Having really consistent patterns for when you go to sleep, and you might have like a wind down period. That might be like an audiobook and a bubble bath or some kind of ritual that sort of helps you relax. Another thing can be to, at the end of the day, have a journal or something where you're like writing down all the things that you need to do the next day or all the things that you're thinking about as a way of kind of purging that material from your mind. Then when you're kind of tempted to lay awake and think about all the things that are undone, you can just remind yourself, got it on the list. I don't need to think about it tonight. So those are some of the kind of go-to words of advice about sleep, but I can have a one-on-one conversation or talk more about it if people have more specific questions.
Cool, thanks. Anyone else? Questions?
David?
You said it's very important to find your why, right? Your personal why, and I've been thinking about this for a very long time and crafting on it. Do you have any tips on how to reach the crystallized why fast?
Yeah, I think Simon Sinek just published a book called Find Your Why. So that's probably rich with rich with ideas and activities. I tend to do a couple of things. So one of the practices that's been really important to me for a number of reasons in my professional life has been to go on a regular retreat, to really have a time that's set aside where I'm thinking about direction, I'm thinking about my business, but I'm not doing email or doing like work tasks, really stepping away from the day-to-day and thinking in more depth about what's the last year been like, what have been my highs and lows, what do I really want to do more of, what do I not want to do so much of. I think really giving yourself space and time to think about it is an important part of that process. And then collecting data on yourself, recording highs and lows, like that question, what brings you life? What's life-giving? Where's that spark for you? Write that down every day. Today, my spark was going paddleboarding with my kid. Today, my spark was having a great conversation over lunch. Today, my spark was... And when you see that data amassed over time, you have some pretty good information about what really is life-giving and what motivates you and what you probably want to do more of in the world. So, yeah.
Cool. Anyone else? You can shout, Aaron.
Yeah, all right. So my wife, she runs her own business. One of the things she struggles with is like she'll have a job or somebody will say something and she just like thinks about it for days and days after. It just bothers her. And she'll say things like, "I'm so sorry to bring this up again, but I need to talk about this." What advice would you have for someone like that who just, you mentioned letting things go, which is what I wish I was better at that too. But
Yeah.
What advice do you have for just letting things go more, not letting things bother you, like tweets or people refunding or something like that?
Yeah, so there's a variety of things that I try with folks. One good strategy is to write it down. You know, that sort of old journaling practice. There's something interesting that happens to our brains, though, because we're kind of getting it out of in here, and we're putting it out on this neutral, objective surface, and it looks different, and it feels different when we literally give it some distance from the inside of our minds. We also, in our family, we have sometimes made a list of mean things that people have said to us, either myself or Rob, and we might read them out loud to our friends. It's sort of like the equivalent of mean tweets. If you guys have seen that on, who is it? Is that Jimmy Kimmel? Yeah. Which is basically like making fun of people who are mean, because it gives us a sense of power again, and a sense of like, that guy's kind of a jerk, so we're gonna sort of talk about it and laugh about it. I think the more that we change the emotional quality of the conversation, which is why having the same conversation over and over isn't necessarily helpful unless you're doing something to infuse a new emotional reaction. So making it funny, or writing down the thing that someone said and burning it, like changing your emotional engagement with it can help us feel less attached to things. You know, also having a mental health professional just sort of on call when you're a founder, I think is probably not a bad idea. that doesn't mean that you have to see them every week for the rest of your life, but just having someone who understands you, who understands why a certain thing might push your buttons in a very specific way, has some context about your background, I think is probably a really worthy investment. Just have somebody that knows you. So.
Any other questions?
Yeah, so you touched upon it a bit. One is about the journaling before you go to bed. There's a lot of different topics about what are the things that you should be journaling about, any best practices about. Some people say that you should, things that you wanted to accomplish next day, maybe also talk about what you accomplished today and what you are grateful for today, and what are the best practices.
Yeah, in terms of strongest research support, I would say gratitude journaling. There's a tremendous amount of research that writing down the 5 things that you're grateful for in a given day is a significant mental health bump. There's also a couple of studies that have looked at the importance of writing down what needs to happen tomorrow. Again, for that reason of sort of clearing the deck, so you're not trying to record those things in your mind while you're trying to go to sleep. The other prompt that I use regularly and like the best for me personally is just high and low. My high point of the day, my low point of the day. Sort of getting to that, how do you find your why? How do you make decisions that optimize the sweet spots of your life, is that you have to collect some data. So yeah, gratitude, things to do tomorrow, high point of the day and low point of the day. That should take 5 minutes or less.
Awesome. Anyone else?
I can talk really loudly. Firstly, thank you for the talk. I know it was titled Protecting from Burnout. What's your best tips if burnout has already happened, either with yourself or crucially with someone else, which I think is also a lot harder to have a positive impact on because we have less control of what that person is doing?
Yeah, so best practice for burnout recovery, you do have to take a break. Usually it's about 2 weeks to let your brain begin to heal and kind of reformat some of the damage that can be done if you've been in burnout, especially for a long time. But usually a break isn't sufficient by itself. So it's a break, some time away, but it's also this deep engagement with returning to the things that are most meaningful to you. I think it's also a hard look at how you're working and what causes burnout for you and reformatting the way that you work. So whether that's increased focus, changing your workload, changing the level of connectivity. Basically, I went through the causes of burnout and tried to give them to you in this kind of reverse way. So if someone's burnt out, they need to take a break, and then they need to kind of look through and see what are the major culprits that are driving this burnout, and how do I return to a place where my work is interesting and meaningful to me? Yeah.
One more.
I don't know. Yeah, so one of the things that you talked about is actually returning to your breath and doing that whenever you're feeling stressed. There is also some people talk about meditation, mindfulness, and all of this stuff. What is your thoughts on that, and how often should we all be doing it?
Yeah, so the question is about meditation and mindfulness. They both have very strong research support. So we can now, use machines to look at the brains of people who are meditating, and their brains are functioning more efficiently than people who don't meditate. And that's an accumulated skill. Our ability to focus our brains and to shut out distraction, whether we do that through formal meditation or we do that through simple deep breathing, there are a couple of ways to get at it. The mechanism is the same. It's like your capacity to turn inside, to slow down your body, to breathe deeply and have your body be quiet and still, and your ability to shut out distraction. So mindfulness, meditation, breath work, yoga, they're all overlapping in terms of the benefit that they cause for both mental and physical health, really. It just kind of depends on whether you want to put on yoga pants and stretch and sweat with other people, or whether you want to sit on a cushion in your house, or whether you don't want to sit on a cushion or do any stretches and you just want to sit there and breathe. I mean, there's sort of a lot of space to make the practice your own based on who you are and what you like.